Hi, my name's Max Singers, and this is my book presentation on Charles Darwin's On the Origin of the Species. It was published in 1859 and underlies probably one of the most important ideas in biology, and that is evolution through natural selection. One of the key points that Darwin brings up in The Origin of the Species is variation. Darwin notes that domestic species seem to have more variety than species of nature, and he tests this with pigeons. He breeds certain breeds of domestic pigeons that are seemingly different together, and he actually produces viable offspring. And from this, he concludes that pigeons must have all descended from one common ancestor to be able to breed with one another. He also notes that the pigeons that he bred with them passed on some of their traits to others, but some of them did not. But also that these offspring then passed it on to their traits to their offspring, and some of the traits from the grandparents' offspring popped up. Darwin seems to think that there is something driving this variation throughout the generations, but he's not really sure what, kind of alluding to the fact that while he didn't know what DNA was, he kind of instinctively knew that something must be driving this. Darwin shows by breeding pigeons that you can select for specific variations. By this selection, you can breed the cows that give the most milk or the chickens that lay the most eggs. Using this concept of selection, Darwin then goes to talk about his concept of natural selection. Darwin discusses how instead of humans driving the selection, the competition for space and resources means that only the fittest individuals can end up producing offspring. This is because the individuals that have the most advantageous variations are more likely to survive. Darwin also notes how some traits are in males of certain species are not advantageous to the survival of that individual, and he thinks that sexual selection by females must be driving this instead. Another idea Darwin talks about is the concept of speciation. Darwin states that in order for speciation to occur, there have to be barriers that prevent individuals of the same species producing offspring. He notes that on large land masses, such as continents, species have a larger distribution but less individual species than on islands where there are a greater number of species but less of them due to the space. He uses this to show that geographic isolation can cause speciation. Because of this, Darwin concludes that all species must have originated from one or a few individual species. I chose to read the illustrated edition of On the Origin of the Species, which contains many beautiful illustrations from the zoology of the Voyage of the Beagle. It also contains excerpts of passages from the Voyage of the Beagle and Darwin's biography, which provide many interesting insights into the concepts which Darwin discusses, as well as an insight into the life of the man. Darwin's idea of evolution by means of natural selection was controversial when it was released, as it challenged Christian religious ideology of creationism. Interestingly, however, at no point does Darwin mention humans throughout his book. However, it's heavily implied throughout that he thought all of the concepts that he discusses are directly applicable to humans as well. In conclusion, Darwin's idea of evolution by means of natural selection is probably one of the most important ideas in ecology, and that we can see throughout his book that despite DNA not being discovered in Darwin's lifetime, he knew instinctively that something must be driving this variation. Because of his ideas developed in his book, Darwin is rightfully recognized as one of the great minds of history. And On the Origin of Species, while being wordy and hard to read at times, is a worthwhile endeavour for any ecologist to undertake. Thank you for listening to my book review.